Trust is the foundation of any successful relationship. But for many older men, it's become a rare commodity. What's behind this growing sense of distrust? Welcome back. It's Vernon. In today's video, we'll explore 4 key reasons why older men often don't trust women anymore and what you, as a woman, need to understand about these concerns. Understanding these factors will help you navigate relationships with empathy and insight, whether you're looking for love or seeking to rebuild trust. But before we get into that, shout out to all the viewers watching this video for trusting me to speak on your behalf. Additionally, a big thanks to everyone who has subscribed to Vernon after 60 and is still following me every day. For those of you who haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on content that could change the way you approach relationships at any age. Let's dive into why trust, or the lack thereof, has become such a complicated issue for older men, and how both sides can take steps toward healing and understanding. Reason number 1: the accumulation of betrayal wounds. When we age, the scars from past relationships become more prominent. For many older men, trust becomes a fragile thing because they've experienced more than their fair share of betrayals. These could be anything from infidelity, broken promises, emotional neglect, or even the pain of a long marriage that ended in divorce. Each betrayal, no matter how small it may seem at the time, adds another layer to the emotional armor we build around ourselves. The reality is, no one escapes relationships unscathed. But as older men, we have a limited capacity to recover from these wounds. With every betrayal, we become more cautious, less willing to open up, and less willing to believe in the possibility of true, unguarded love. Understanding that these wounds are not signs of weakness, but rather markers of survival, can help us heal and eventually allow trust to be rebuilt. I've known Robert, a 68-year-old retired engineer, for years. He had been married twice. His first wife left him for his best friend after 15 years of marriage, taking half his assets and limiting his access to his children. His second wife, whom he married after what he thought was careful consideration, developed a gambling addiction that she hid from him for 3 years, ultimately draining their joint retirement accounts. When I suggested to Robert that he might consider dating again, he said something that stayed with me, that he was afraid of being betrayed again. At his age, he doesn't have 20 years to rebuild what someone else might destroy. The ancient Greek concept of pathos, suffering that teaches wisdom, applies powerfully to older men's relationship experiences. Each betrayal doesn't just create a wound, it creates a learning experience that informs future decisions. Unfortunately, these lessons often generalize in ways that make new trust more difficult. Unlike physical wounds that heal and leave us as strong as before, emotional betrayal wounds often leave psychological scar tissue that makes us more sensitive to similar threats. When an older man has experienced multiple betrayals, infidelity, financial deception, emotional manipulation, or abandonment during difficult times, his trust system becomes hyper-vigilant. This isn't about being weak or holding grudges. It's about the practical reality that recovery from major betrayals requires time, energy, and resilience that may feel more limited in later years. The fear isn't just about being hurt again. It's about not having enough life left to heal and rebuild. Research from the Journal of Aging Studies indicates that men who experience major relationship betrayals after age 50 show significantly longer recovery times and higher rates of what researchers call protective withdrawal, compared to younger men experiencing similar betrayals. If you're a woman wondering why an older man seems guarded, consider asking gently about his relationship history, rather than taking his caution personally. Often, what appears to be rejection of you is actually protection of himself, based on past experiences that may have nothing to do with your character or intentions. For men experiencing trust issues stemming from past betrayals, healing involves a delicate but necessary balance. It requires us to acknowledge that while it's important to protect ourselves, we shouldn't confuse self-protection with shutting ourselves off entirely from new connections. Often, the tendency is to build walls so high and thick that no one can get through. But the problem is, these walls don't just keep out potential harm, they also keep out the love, care, and connection that we crave. Healing isn't about punishing new people for the mistakes of the past. Instead, it's about understanding that not every person will cause the same hurt that we've experienced before. The key is to differentiate between healthy, reasonable caution, being aware and protective because of our past, and paralyzing fear that prevents us from moving forward altogether. Trusting again doesn't mean jumping headfirst into something unguarded. It means taking small steps towards letting go of the fear that keeps us stuck in the past. So, what is the next reason why men lose trust in women? The situation grows even more complex when we consider how romantic idealism can itself become a source of mistrust. Reason number 2. The disillusionment with romance's promises. Building on our understanding of how betrayal wounds accumulate over time, there's another layer to older men's trust issues: the gradual disillusionment with the very promises that romance and marriage are built upon. This connects directly to betrayal because often what men experience as betrayal isn't just personal unfaithfulness, but the failure of relationships to deliver on their fundamental promises. My former colleague Harold, a 72-year-old widower who shared something profound with me. Harold said he was raised to believe that if he were a good husband, if he worked hard, provided well, stayed faithful, and tried to make my wife happy, he would have a happy marriage. He did all of those things for 35 years, and his wife was still chronically unhappy, constantly critical, and ultimately told him she had fallen out of love with him. He realized that he had been operating under false promises about how relationships actually work. Harold's disillusionment wasn't with his ex-wife specifically, but with the entire cultural narrative that suggests good behavior guarantees good outcomes in relationships. He had followed what he thought were the rules, only to discover that relationships operate on emotional dynamics that don't always reward virtue or effort. Many older men have learned through painful experience that they cannot control their partner's feelings, satisfaction, or faithfulness, no matter how well they behave. This realization can create a profound mistrust, not just of women, but of the entire romantic enterprise. When you've invested decades in trying to make relationships work according to traditional models, being the provider, the protector, the problem solver, and those relationships still fail or become sources of chronic dissatisfaction, it can feel like the entire system is rigged against you. This disillusionment often intensifies in later years when men realize they followed societal scripts about masculinity and relationships that promised outcomes they didn't receive. The trust issue isn't just with individual women, but with the cultural promises about how relationships are supposed to work. If you're interacting with an older man who seems cynical about romance, understand that his skepticism may be based on decades of experience with relationships that promised happiness but delivered disappointment. This isn't necessarily about you, it's about his learned wariness of romantic promises in general. For men experiencing this disillusionment, healing involves developing more realistic expectations about what relationships can and cannot provide, while remaining open to authentic connections that don't rely on outdated scripts or unrealistic promises. How has your view of relationships and love changed over the years? Has the disillusionment with romance's promises affected your ability to trust? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help others who are navigating the same journey. This shift in expectations becomes even more important when it's paired with the fears surrounding financial vulnerability, which we'll explore right now. Reason number 3. The financial vulnerability fear. Now we reach what I consider one of the most misunderstood sources of trust issues for older men: the fear of financial vulnerability that becomes particularly acute in later years. Let me reflect on what we've discovered so far: how betrayal wounds accumulate over time, creating protective barriers, and how disillusionment with romance's promises makes men skeptical of traditional relationship structures. Both of these experiences become amplified when combined with the very real financial vulnerabilities that come with aging. The ancient philosopher Aristotle wrote about the virtue of prudence, practical wisdom, that helps us navigate complex situations. For older men, prudence often means protecting the financial resources that represent not just comfort, but survival and dignity in their final years. Here's why financial vulnerability creates unique trust issues for older men. Unlike younger men who can rebuild wealth if they make mistakes, older men typically have limited earning potential and fixed incomes. Their accumulated assets often represent decades of work and sacrifice, and the fear of losing those resources to someone with ulterior motives can create profound trust anxiety. This fear is heightened by cultural narratives and real-life examples of older men being targeted by women seeking financial security. Whether these fears are realistic in any specific relationship, they represent a legitimate concern about protecting hard-earned resources during vulnerable years. The Financial Gerontology Institute indicates that financial abuse of older adults results in losses of over $36 billion annually, with romantic partners and spouses being responsible for approximately 60% of these cases. For older men aware of these statistics, trust becomes intertwined with financial self-protection. If you're a woman dating an older man who seems overly concerned about financial boundaries, try to understand that his caution may stem from legitimate vulnerability rather than personal distrust of you. These conversations require patience and gradual trust building, rather than pressure for immediate transparency. As men navigate the complexities of trust, the real challenge becomes balancing financial responsibility with the openness necessary for forming genuine emotional connections. While it's natural to protect oneself after past experiences, it's also important to stay open to the possibility of building a new, healthy relationship. To achieve this, it's essential to have upfront, honest conversations about financial expectations and boundaries. By setting clear communication about finances from the start, men can safeguard their emotional well-being without letting past fears dictate their future relationships. This proactive approach can foster trust, reduce anxiety, and create space for authentic emotional connections to flourish. Give this video a like to show your support and share your thoughts in the comments. Which financial concerns affect your ability to trust fully in relationships? And how do you balance protection with openness? This financial anxiety often connects to deeper fears about caregiving and abandonment in our later years. Reason number 4. The caregiver abandonment anxiety. As we delve deeper into the complex trust issues facing older men, we encounter what might be the most emotionally challenging fear of all: the anxiety about whether someone will stay when caregiving becomes necessary. This builds directly on the financial vulnerability we just explored, because the fear isn't just about money being taken, but about being abandoned when you most need support and have the least to offer in return. Clint Eastwood, the celebrated actor and filmmaker who, after his divorce, became very vocal about his fears and challenges as he entered his later years. In interviews, Eastwood has spoken candidly about the vulnerability and concerns he faced as he aged, particularly the fear of being alone as his health began to decline. Eastwood, who had been independent for much of his life, found himself confronting the very real emotional and physical challenges of aging. Like many men in his age group, Clint was aware of the emotional and financial weight of caregiving and how it could alter the dynamics of personal relationships. His concerns mirror the caregiver abandonment anxiety because, as he aged, he realized that those who had once been there for him might not always be around, especially when caregiving became necessary. This is particularly poignant for men who have spent their lives being the strong, dependable provider and protector, and are now facing the reality that their ability to reciprocate that support may be limited in their later years. The weight of this fear becomes particularly heavy for older men because they statistically face higher rates of serious health problems and often die younger than their female partners. The question, "Will she stay when I become a burden?" haunts many men who are considering new relationships in their later years. Men who have witnessed superficial relationships crumble under caregiving pressure become understandably cautious about trusting new partners with their potential vulnerability. The fear isn't just about being left alone during illness. It's about the devastating emotional betrayal of discovering that someone you trusted didn't actually love you unconditionally. When you're facing mortality and vulnerability, this kind of abandonment can feel like the ultimate rejection of your worth as a human being. Additionally, older men often worry that they have more to offer in terms of companionship and resources during healthy years, but may become net drains on their partners as health challenges increase. This creates anxiety about whether their value in the relationship will survive the transition from independence to interdependence. When you're building a relationship with an older man, understand that his concerns about long-term commitment may stem from realistic fears about abandonment during vulnerable times. Demonstrating reliability during smaller challenges can help build trust for larger ones. Both men and women entering relationships after 60, having honest conversations about caregiving expectations, health concerns, and long-term commitment can help address these anxieties before they become trust barriers. Conclusion: older men don't trust women anymore, not because they've become bitter or closed-hearted, but because they've learned through painful experience that trust in later life carries higher stakes and offers fewer opportunities for recovery from betrayal. We've explored 5 profound reasons why many older men struggle with trust. The accumulation of betrayal wounds that create protective barriers. The disillusionment with romance's promises that makes relationships feel risky. The financial vulnerability that comes with fixed incomes and limited earning potential. The anxiety about caregiver abandonment when health challenges arise. And the concern about mortality manipulation by those seeking to benefit from their death. These trust issues aren't character flaws or signs of emotional damage. They're adaptive responses to real vulnerabilities that come with aging. Understanding them is the first step toward healing them. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle taught about the golden mean, finding balance between extremes. For older men struggling with trust, this means finding the balance between protective wisdom and paranoid isolation, between reasonable caution and complete withdrawal from intimate connection. For women seeking to understand or build relationships with older men, recognize that their trust barriers aren't personal rejections of you, but protective responses based on accumulated life experience. Building trust with an older man often requires patience, consistency, and understanding that proves your character over time, rather than demanding immediate emotional or financial intimacy. If this wisdom helped you understand something important about trust in later life relationships, please share it with others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is help people understand that their protective instincts are normal responses to real experiences. Moreover, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you can continue receiving insights that could make a meaningful difference in your relationships and overall well-being. Thank you for being here, and let's keep the conversation going.